And we'll I think be able to get through these pretty quickly. And it's my fault that we went long the last time. So I will endeavor to do a better job. But I appreciate your willingness to work through this, because we're discussing obviously very important issues, and so thanks for that. I'll turn it over now to Mayor Knox White, who is chairing the governance component, and he's doing so with the assistance of the Executive Officer of the Governor, and Sim Singh is assisting this component. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, James. Governor McMaster, Lieutenant Governor Evett, thank you for allowing all of us to participate in this. The governance subgroup, fine group of people. Everybody got along really well, and I appreciate sincerely their good efforts. We're primarily local governments, city and the county, and we use the county association and the municipal association to kind of comb out across the state on people's best ideas. So it's local government, then education, which I'm no expert with, but we had a lot of good input on the education component. I want to quickly say the education folks supplied a large tome of ideas right off the bat in alphabetical order, done exactly well with tabs and everything. We gave those out to some of the other subgroups. Today we'll just present some sort of headlines from some elements we maintained. So it's local government, education, and finally first responders and law enforcement. I want to also say the law enforcement folks were very organized and immediately had good things to present. So that was all good. It was a local government that was a little bit all over the board at the beginning, but we kind of got them back together. Just up front, some common themes. Because these are things that came up again and again in our first meetings, especially on the local government side. I want to say a word that ties into this and the last speakers. I want to say a word about the restaurant industry, because no group have we heard from more in local government than the people who run the restaurants, and some of the same people who were first shut down, in fact. When you go back to the beginning of all this, you shut down events and then restaurants and bars. So they've really borne the brunt, but they have really been champs. And I want to say also Bobby Williams' comments last week before this committee. He presented a little levity, which was much needed, and a great deal of seriousness as well. But the guidelines that the restaurant folks put together, they were good to their word, are just absolutely outstanding. Obviously, they impressed the governor because he acted on them. But really great guidelines, and that has been the experience back home, that the number one people I've heard from in terms of not just emails and phone calls, but serious discussions, have been folks in the restaurant industry. And you might think they'd be the ones who'd call you up and say, what is going on here, what's happening, we want to get back in business. Of course they want to get back in business, but that really was not then and has not been the tenor of the conversations. Virtually all the conversations, I was telling Bobby, have reflected kind of what we heard from him, which was they're one group that really understand that this is about confidence. The word we've heard a lot. This is about making people comfortable to go back to the restaurant. It's not just a matter of opening. It's about being comfortable to going back to the restaurant or going back to a shop and store. And I heard that over and over again and continue to from those folks, and it's very important. So sure enough, they have put forth protocols, really well considered, well thought out protocols for reopening restaurants and in phases, and acting as serious as they could about that. And they've also been the people who have talked to me the most about the issue we heard a lot about in the last session, and that is testing and tracing. And you may not think it would come from restaurant people, but yes, it does. As one premier restaurateur in Greenville told me several times, he wants to be able to assure that if anybody shows up for work in his restaurant and they're not feeling so good, if they seem to be perhaps ill, he wants to be able to send that person immediately to be tested. And not just at the hospital someplace, but perhaps right in downtown, somewhere accessible and convenient. And I think that's a good thing, too. They're really on that. More than ever, too, the other thing they talk about is we don't want to go through this again. So the testing and the tracing is important as an early detection system, if you will, to know if there's something recurring, and they don't want to see it again. So the confidence issue, we hear that a lot, the confidence word, and good to hear it in the last session as well. So a lot of talk about that, keeping things clean and safe. And the second idea that was a common theme from the education folks as well as local government was what an historic opportunity we have as a state to learn by this experience of distant learning and being on Zoom and such. Great opportunity for the state to commit itself to broadband services in the rural area and expanded internet and faster internet too in urban and rural areas of South Carolina. So an opportunity there. Okay, turning to the specifics, and we heard Senator Davis went through this list a moment ago, but it was good to see that he described it as low-hanging fruit. I like that. I don't want to do anything to discourage that thought. So here we go. Some ideas that were called from local governments across the state, issues that they were dealing with. Of course, they're all looking at their budget situations, deteriorating and the like, but these are some things that would be helpful and effective in helping local governments deal with it. Number one, indeed, was an issue of budget extensions. The budget periods are coming up. Local governments have no device called continuing resolution, so some extra time to prepare and adopt budgets and determine tax millage and the like. It's hard to do that when you don't know what your revenues are going to look like. Next is a couple things that will be very helpful when you're keeping your eye on the ultimate goal, which is to help small businesses get back in business. That's really the goal. What's happening is that local governments from Charleston to Columbia to Aiken to Camden, everywhere, immediately moved soon into this to give people a break on payment of taxes and fees by delaying penalties or waiving penalties and the like. And of course, many of the utilities were trying to be helpful with water bills and sewer bills and things like that. So we want to continue to encourage local governments to be able to do that, to be able to make waivers and delays and postponements so people can get their business back up again. So how do you do that? Well, it would be very helpful if local governments had some extra revenue as a cushion, if you will, during this time period. So here's some good ideas. One is the front loading of local government fund payments. They're normally paid quarterly. There's another payment coming up. If it could be advanced by 3 months, that'd be very helpful to especially some smaller local governments. The state revolving loan fund is a good one to look at because those are monies that the local governments have to pay back, if you will. They're tied to utility payments. The utility payments which were being delayed or not there at all be helpful if the loan repayment dates could be extended for local governments. The third one will come up a lot, and that's the 1% employer pension contribution. It's already been suspended for now, and that is a good thing for local governments too, to again give some cushion to their budget. Next is flexibility with hospitality and accommodations taxes. This was mentioned. I would just say anything that's an unobligation, that's not an obligated payment under either of those taxes for local hospitality, if they could be used for other purposes, that might be helpful as well. Well, those are the local government proposals. Hopefully they are low-hanging fruit. They all give a little extra cushion again to local governments. Education. Got a couple ideas from K through 12 and then higher education and tech schools. Number one, same idea there, the pension contribution. Good, helpful advice, good, helpful suggestion there. Second is waiving of statutory requirements. I'll just read what they said. Examples include annual testing and reporting requirements, which have already been waived by the U.S. Department of Education. This waiver would also address school makeup days by allowing days of distance learning during the pandemic to count toward the 180 instructional day requirement. So the U.S. Department of Education has already okayed that idea, or has not? Local, okay. That makes a lot of sense. The next one's a good one. Somebody brought this to our attention. You know, there are certain school boards that apparently require a petition in order to be on the ballot for school board. That's a problem. Next, under higher education and technical colleges, there it is again, suspension of the 1% employer pension contribution for a time at least. Then there was a lot of material provided by higher ed folks on this next one about basically employee furlough policies, what they can and cannot do. Currently, institutions can only furlough when state revenues decline. Institutions want the flexibility to deal with the anticipated decline in tuition. Next, leave forgiveness. This has to do with helping individuals not deplete their annual or sick leave because they couldn't be at the job and they could not perform the job remotely. Most people can, but some people cannot, and that became an issue there. Apparently this is done in the case of natural disasters, so there's some precedent for this particular flexibility provision. And finally, on this category, scholarship requirements. This is another thing we'll be digging into a little more deeply because there are a lot of ramifications here on scholarship money that's been committed and perhaps not used. But in particular, the concern is about students who might not return this fall because of family financial problems and how to help them keep their scholarship money. So that's a summary of some. We had a number of other good suggestions on that. We did farm some of that back out to some other committees, though. And then finally, from emergency services and first responders, an issue that I think was discussed last time a little bit too is about workers' comp and whether or not COVID-19 coverage is there for first responders under the workers' comp system. Some clarity, a bit back and forth on that, but some clarity is still being asked for. Very importantly, mental and emotional health programs for first responders. That came up a lot, unfortunately. And then finally, establishing a regional detention center for inmates that have tested positive. Well, Governor, that is all we have to present at this time. We're still pulling some data together from local governments in terms of what they're facing on their budgets and such, but we know that lost revenues are not the topic at hand. And again, I hope these were some good practical suggestions, many of which I do hope are indeed low-hanging fruit. So thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Pope?
This is maybe back to Mr. Davis's low-hanging fruit, and I know Senator Malloy mentioned this on the workers' comp issues. Yeah. One thing, law enforcement had reached out to me. You know, we are asking law enforcement to do the exact opposite of everything we've said we're going to do. You know, we've asked law enforcement to go in instead of stay away, you know, to deal with people that may or may not have, you know, there's been difficulties with DHEC of law enforcement, you know, not being able to share the data, and we've tried to address that. Law enforcement has some concern, and the sheriff may chime in on this, that kind of a proof issue. You know, if they're, and it may not come, Senator Malloy, I guess we'll know when the comp hearings roll out, but that law enforcement would be on duty and have to somehow prove it. With the difficulty, if I dealt with 20 people and DHEC can't tell me who did or didn't have because of HIPAA requirements. So again, that may be a legislative thing we have to deal with, but that was one issue was out there. Two that we really may or didn't touch on that came back. The legislature, we have allowed retired officers to come back and assist, and for that matter, retired state employees, teachers and things, to come back and make more than the minimum amount. And the initial language we had when we did the emergency order took it to, I believe, September. And again, that may be something we can deal with legislatively, but we might need to open that opportunity up for your local law enforcement, for your teachers, for whoever to have retirees and be able to pay them more. Again, that was something law enforcement had asked me to mention. It's in there, but you know, sometimes having it out front doesn't hurt from a legislative standpoint.
That's very good. Sheriff Lott, you want to say anything about that? Those are good suggestions.
No, both of those topics are concerned right now. We've talked about the workman's comp, and we got a letter from workman's comp saying that it would be covered, but again, saying it would be covered and what we would have to prove, I think, may be difficult.
Different thing.
So we probably need a little bit better understanding, and are we going to have to fight to get it covered or not? And the other was that we do have 130 people that went back to work, and that's on the executive order now where they can you know, work without limitations. We're probably asking that go from September maybe to the end of the year, extend it a little bit longer.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Thornley?
Yes, Mayor Knox, I just want you to reinforce, since we have our legislative members here, that much of what higher ed was asking was flexibility with moving one pot of money to another, and much of what higher ed was after is currently included in the proposed continuing resolution. So we do think you'll be able to meet many of the needs that higher ed is asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for emphasizing that.
Any other questions?
One, Mr. Chair, I would just add from
Senator Malloy.
Sheriff and Solicitor Pope is that the presumption should be on the side of the claimant, and the act is liberally construed in the favor of the claimant. So it should end up favoring the law enforcement officer who is having to confront. And I'm sure Tommy will look at the act as it is now. And I think that we're probably covered already, so that the burden will not necessarily fall on them. They just end up, they've already coded the system. And so if they present the injury, then I think that they should be covered.
Thank you for that clarification, Senator. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our resources component. Former Senator Greg Ryberg, and I think, Brian, are you going to come up on behalf of the Executive Budget Office? Of course, this is the one all of you have been waiting for, I know. As my good friend Greg Ryberg makes his way up to the podium to present, I'll tell you, it seems like there's been some the evolving guidance that we get from the Department of Treasury, and so a lot of what dictates what can and cannot happen, what can and cannot be done, a lot of that comes from the Department of Justice, or Department of Treasury guidelines that Mr. Gaines has referenced. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Greg Ryberg.
James, you're right. I guess what we're telling you today might not be exactly what's true tomorrow, okay? Brian gets updates on a daily basis as to how these funds can be used. And what we have been asked to do by the governor is to take a look at two of the pots of money that are coming from the federal government to be used in agency support and to be used in political subdivisions, whether it be the counties or the cities. What we're charged with is to identify the process and appropriate metrics for dispersing the funds and to ensure transparency of all dispersed funds in consultation with the appropriate stakeholders. I think transparency is absolutely critical when we're talking about the size of the pot of money that we have. One of them is $1.996 billion. The other is $1.996 billion, and the other one is $48 million. And so ours is a setting up of the processes and what we would recommend to the governor that he does going forward with the disbursement of the money. The meeting that was held last Thursday was really to give everybody on the committee and the additions that we have to the committee from the state legislature an idea of what the CARES Act entails. We did receive also at the meeting input from K through 12 education, both public and private, and we did receive input from the county and from municipal government. The funds that are coming to us are, first set of funds are the $1.996 billion. It's called the CRF funds, Coronavirus Relief Fund. And these funds can be used for necessary expenditures that are related to COVID-19, those expenditures that were not accounted for in the most recently passed budget by the political subdivision, and the costs incurred between March 1st and December 30th, 2020, as relates to COVID, the coronavirus. These funds must be expended by December 30th of 2020. Eligible expenditures for all are related to COVID-19. Medical expenses, public hospitals, and actually as it does change. Last night, private hospitals were also added to this list. Clinics, emergencies, responses, and telemedicine. Under public health expenses that are allowable for the political subdivisions and for the agencies are PPE, enforcement of public health orders, disinfection of public areas, and other facilities. Payroll expenses, and these are the additional payroll expenses that are COVID-19 related. They are those expenses that were not budgeted but are related to COVID-19. And some of the other areas that the CRF funds can be used for are food delivery, distance learning, paid sick and family medical leave for public employees. The second pot of money, the $48 million, provides emergency support to local educational agencies and higher educational institutions. The funds are awarded to eligible entities within 1 year of receipt and requires maintenance of effort for K through 12 and higher education. The potentially eligible financial needs are support for remote learning, telework, sanitation of public buildings and playgrounds, purchase of PPE, support for rural communities and vulnerable populations, testing, tracing, isolation, including quarantining and treatment, summer learning opportunities and/or instructional recovery days for K through 12, support for historically black colleges and universities. And actually, last night there was one more fund that was added. There are in total 29 funds now, and that was specifically for historical black colleges and universities. The only two funds that we're talking about, though, are the two that are related to the governor's discretion with oversight by the General Assembly. Also included in the list of eligible financial needs are payroll overtime costs for COVID, that's for COVID-19, additional COVID-19 related expenses. Possibly investment in unemployment insurance trust fund or small business assistance. One of the things that was discussed, I think, at many of the committees and has been discussed at length in our committee was the broadband. And the broadband would have certainly helped us in this pandemic situation in order to reach all parts of South Carolina. Unfortunately, as we talk about the expenditure for broadband, we must realize that in South Carolina, we do not have a governance structure for statewide implementation. We don't have a statewide plan at this point in time. And in addition, the funds are supposed to be expended by December the 30th of 2020. Now, at the same time, last Thursday, apparently, there was a bill filed in the Congress to, I think, put $85 billion into a fund for broadband across the country. And so that is one of the issues that confronts us as we give advice to the governor on how to allocate the funds as to where exactly does broadband sit and what is its real priority in the state of South Carolina. Some potential solutions for our lack of having a statewide plan is to develop the statewide plan in collaboration with the General Assembly. Secondly, would be to deploy statewide hotspots as a temporary measure until statewide broadband plan is developed. The information that we need, and I think we heard a lot today from the Response and Protection Committee, is we need to help and work with the local governments to determine what the costs for some of the needed services that we know we're going to have going forward, testing, to begin with PP&E and the rest of the things that we're going to have to expend costs on, or spend money on. We need more specific data on those costs. Right now, we're just kind of guessing exactly what the costs are. But we intend to work through this and make a meaningful recommendation to the governor as to how to proceed with the expenditure of $1.996 billion and the $48 million that's the educational funds. One of the complications to our plan is that there, as I mentioned, there are 26 or 27 other pots of money coming into South Carolina, specifically to certain agencies. And what we want to be sure of that we don't duplicate what's coming in one of those 26, 27 pots of money. We don't want to duplicate the spending of that money with the $1.996 billion that the governor has the need to recommend how it be spent. I thought when we got the committee that talks about money, it would be the easier one until we had our first meeting. And the second meeting, I'm sure, will show some of the challenges that we have going forward as to the difficulty in doing an equitable distribution of the money. But we're prepared for the task. I want to thank the staff that we have that did an excellent job the other day. Marcia, Brian, and Melanie, y'all were great. I think we have a great committee. I assure you that this committee wants to make sure that the money can be followed. I don't think anybody in this committee wants to have their name attached to something that's inappropriate relative to the allocation of the money. And so we intend to be good stewards and to make a good steward recommendation, Governor, at hopefully by the end of the month. It is our intent for the committee members to meet next Tuesday at 1:30. We're going to meet in this room here, and hopefully that's convenient for everybody, or if they could call in or and attend in a remote basis, that also would be okay. But I think we had a meaningful meeting the other day. We've got some things that we will cut out in future meetings that really we can't do anything about, and so we will hopefully get the meetings down to 2 to 2.5 hours in the future. One of the big issues to the political subdivisions is their loss of revenue. Unfortunately, there is no provision from the federal government relative to this money to address loss of revenue. I guess you might say, though, that could change because we do get changes on a daily basis, Brian, and so that might change. But as it stands today, those political subdivisions that are losing revenue because of COVID-19, unfortunately, this governor's pot of money is not available for that distribution. I guess one of the things that I first saw as an opportunity going forward was the broadband. And I was really encouraged that we could hit that part of South Carolina that we don't at this point touch. And the touch is because of accessibility that they have or the affordability that these individuals are not able to afford it. But the fact that we don't have a plan makes it difficult to allocate that money in a large sum to make a real difference relative to broadband going forward. I would love to see something in the General Assembly that would change that would give us a plan that we could allocate money and do something really positive. I think the hot spots is a good start, but it doesn't answer the problem. And we are going to have future pandemics. We are going to have future situations like this, and we got to have a broadband plan if we're going to I think, last into the future. I think we cannot afford to have a rural South Carolina and a city South Carolina. I don't have anything more. Brian, do you have anything? Brian's the best. Okay, Brian's the best. Okay, so any questions?
Mayor White?
Yeah, under your, the slide that says potentially eligible financial needs.
Yes.
On the last one, it says, on the last line, it says small business assistance.
Yeah,
What is that referring to?
Okay, there was a question asked at the meeting as to whether or not, this was asked by the county governments, executive county governments, whether or not they could have grant money to local businesses. One of the concerns that I expressed, and I think it was shared by others, that where does the expertise lie that you can evaluate these applications to make sure that the money is going to a truly needed business, okay, and not flowing to somebody it should not be flowing to. But it is believed by Brian that we could do this because if we don't have a Main Street in South Carolina, we don't need big government in South Carolina. And so if we can get any help to businesses that is outside of the monies that they're already getting from the federal government, that was the discussion, and it was brought forward by the County Association of County Governments.
I knew Greenville County was looking at that, but I didn't know what the authority was for eligibility. Would that be for non-COVID related activities, though? Obviously, those would be part of it, but
No, it would be COVID related.
COVID related in terms of their losses or expenses they had, but surely not just business losses, or would it?
You know, the question is that after we heard the presentation from the chamber about those not coming back into business, I think it would be any way that we could help businesses, if that would help businesses get jump-started and get back into business. But it is.
It's like too good.
The guidance as it exists today allows for a small business grant program to fund those businesses that had a loss due to a business interruption. So let's say if the city or county closed businesses in that particular location, you could do a small business grant for that purpose. Another idea that was brought before the committee by, I think this one was from the Municipal Association, was instead of giving financial support, was providing things like PPE or providing protective equipment. Let's say if you go to the grocery stores, you see the plexiglass, being able to do things like that to help restaurants and businesses open back up safely.
So it would not be for loss of income?
No,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
It could be for loss due to a business interruption, but the idea as brought forth by the Municipal Association would be to provide equipment that businesses could need to open safely.
And you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce. Is there an opportunity for your Chamber of Commerce to maybe secure some of this funding?
Brian is shaking his head the wrong way for you. Okay. Okay. I think it was the wrong way for you, but
It is.
okay.
It is the wrong way.
Okay.
But I had to ask.
But I like Brian because he gives it to you the way it is.
Right.
So.
Well, I had to ask.
Mr. Chairman?
I see Representative Pope. And Tom, is your hand up too? Senator Davis. We'll go to Representative Pope first.
This is more an observation that took place on the broadband issue. Molly Spearman we talked about education. It's ironic, you would think York County wouldn't have a problem with our population, but we had places where teachers weren't able to have access, and Superintendent shared some of that with, so it's students, teachers, it's healthcare providers with telemedicine, so it's a bigger issue, but as I dug into it, one thing I noticed from a legislative standpoint, we're going to, once again, as we often have, Governor, in South Carolina, one size doesn't fit all. you know, someplace where we have no infrastructure, then that might be a co-op opportunity in the lower part of the state, for example. But in York County, the infrastructure's there, but we've got to figure out a transparent way if we're going to work with the people that are already providing, with the AT&Ts or the Spectrums and those folks, to find out a transparent, cost-effective way of doing it. My biggest concern, as we often do with government, is we just take a big lump of money and throw it in. We've seen it in technology. I'm still wondering if we got the right court system, Senator Malloy, you know, with our technology, with the software. We throw money at it, and I think we've just got to be, and Governor, I think you guys can lead on this, to be more proactive, to recognize one place the co-op model may work, one place supplementing what these other entities do may work, but I definitely think this is an opportunity that crosses medical, it crosses educational. It's something we've got to tackle.
Can I hit
Representative
Ms.
Pope, I appreciate your comment. You don't realize how complex it is until you recommend or talk about broadband, and then your phone rings off the hook from entities that you didn't know were in the broadband business, okay? But they are.
So which the Representative Pope is so accurate, because that's why it's so important that their recommendation about developing a plan for South Carolina. The FCC's been doing some of that in a couple other states where they spend about $200,000 or $300,000 on a plan to find out where exactly are those gaps, so that you don't just disperse money to a bunch of entities like an AT&T or whoever, when AT&T may not have any of those customers. Somebody else may have those customers. So it's real important to have that plan in place before money's spent on it.
Well, I just wanted to say that State Chamber has, along with Ted and I, worked to develop a whole committee that brought all these stakeholders, including AT&T and all the co-ops, together toward the end of 2019. Of course, we've been a little derailed because of this in terms of being able to meet, but all the stakeholders were in the room, and you're right, sir. There's a whole lot of entities, more than we even realized when we started on the project. And what we found is that during the course of the meeting, all of the stakeholders want this for South Carolina. There was no adversity amongst the stakeholders. Everybody wants to figure out what their part can be. And so there has been work on getting a really refined map, not a broad stroke, but a real finite map that tells us exactly what you're talking about, Pam. Where are the customers? So it has been a personal passion of mine to work toward broadband, particularly for telehealth, telemedicine, and most importantly for children, and finally for workforce development. So there's a group of us, probably about 50, that have gathered a couple different times with stakeholders at the State Chamber, and we continue to work on that. We're happy to bring you in as a part of it, and we'd be tickled if you'd like to advocate for us to have money toward the completion of that project.
And before I get to Senator Davis, and because he's had his hand up, and I just want everybody to think about this for a second. We have about 776,000 students, Superintendent Spearman, and I think 6% since this started, we've not heard from.
Wow.
And so as you think about figuring out a plan, think about that. Because that's a sobering thought that should challenge all of us to get to the table, put our sweat equity into it, and move forward with coming up with something. So, Senator Davis.
Just, the comments I was going to make, James, have pretty much been made in regard to broadband, and I commend Senator Robert for what he's done here in recognizing that we need to have that data. We need to know where service isn't being provided before we go ahead and make, any, great expenditures of money. But I think it's appropriate to note it as something that should be, some CRF funds should be used for that mapping purpose. The other observation I was making in regard to the small business assistance, one metric you might want to look like are those small businesses that applied for Payroll Protection Program money or EIDL money and would have qualified, but for the federal funds being allocated for that purpose having been exhausted. So if you wanted to approach it, that might be one way to define the universe of small businesses that could receive those grants, because it ought not be that some small businesses get that federal relief because They either had good relationships with banks, they were able to hire accountants to have, more complete applications. We ought to not have an unlevel playing field there. So I just suggest that as being one of the ways in which you might want to identify the small businesses that could get that assistance.
Thank you.
I have one more question, please.
Yes.
Under the support for rural communities and vulnerable population, those are two separate entities. Say, if I have a community that is 60 or 70% retirees, 65 or older, then that community would be available to apply for this money.
That's not applying for that money. The point behind that particular bullet point is talking about providing the testing and treatment needed for those individuals. It's not giving them money, it's providing that service.
For the equipment or testing or whatever.
Correct.
Okay, that's why I wondered.
Senator Robert, we have Dr. Artis has a question.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly not to belabor the point on broadband, but I do think it merits amplification here. On a federal level, $20 billion was allocated in January of 2020 under the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. The absence of a plan in the state of South Carolina forecloses our ability to access those dollars. I've been on conference calls all week with the FCC thinking about the broadband issue because the mapping that's been discussed really is not that complex or difficult. The reality is I was able to provide them today with a list of zip codes where I have students who reside in the state of South Carolina with zero access to broadband capabilities. It's not that difficult to map it out. When you mentioned a moment ago sweat equity, that's really what this requires. This is not a huge allocation of money. This is a subcommittee with the imprimatur of the governor to put some of us to work to develop a plan to tap into those federal dollars that are designated for this purpose. It doesn't have to come out of the governor's budget necessarily. It is the absence of the plan that is resulting in our not being able to access these already allocated federal dollars pre-COVID. And with the next COVID Relief Act, I was on a call this afternoon with Senator Scott. You indicated, of course, he'd been a part of this conversation along with Lindsey Graham and certainly Senator Clyburn. Also with the chamber today, had a conference call on the issue of broadband. It is top of mind for everyone right now for the very reasons that Lou and others have articulated. It crosses the spectrum from education to medicine and, quite frankly, the competitive nature of the state of South Carolina. COVID or not, this has to happen for this state to reach its optimal levels of competitiveness. I'd be happy to join that committee. This is not time-consuming, and the time is now to absolutely move so that we do not have to use these funds, but rather can tap into the already allocated federal dollars in the FCC under this bill. So happy to work on that and would urge the state, of course, our General Assembly to also make that a priority.
Let me echo that. I think it's clear now is the time for a very good plan, and I've got in this massive notebook out here, I've got a map somewhere that shows exactly where it is and where it isn't. But this is an opportunity, and now's the time. I'm delighted that we're here talking about this now because it is time.
I didn't realize the importance besides education relative to the broadband until my son, who's a recent doctor up in Greenville, called me and put me on the clock relative to being one of his patients over the telephone. And so I thought, I'm looking at the screen, I'm seeing him, he's looking at the screen, he's seeing me, and you'll be glad to know I did pass the test. I was healthy at that time, but that was a week ago, so we'll see. We'll see.
I think Representative Hewitt has a question.
Yes.
Not a question, just a comment, and it goes back to broadband. That in the General Assembly and in the House, we have been looking at ways to extend broadband. This past year, I served on legislative oversight. We had the Rural Infrastructure Authority in. We talked to them about maybe were they the right organization to look at that, but under their current setup, they're really not. They're just there to provide funds for water and sewer and all. And with them, then we'll be trying to get the towns and cities in the broadband business. So it wasn't the right setup. We had the Department of Commerce scheduled this fall to be up for oversight, and that was going to be some questions that we had for them. Maybe were they the right organization? So, we're looking for guidance. We're trying to find answers in the General Assembly and way to do it, because we do realize it is very important.
Yeah, and I think also the outside study would be so important because we need input from people that have no skin in the game as far as tilting the scales of how it should happen in South Carolina. And I know a lot of those people are probably listening to this today, and but we need to have an objective outside view of this. Okay?
Mr. Chairman?
Lieutenant Governor's got a comment, I think.
Yes. So, Dr. Artis, thank you so much for talking about other federal dollars for broadband, because I talked about it a bit during our resource subcommittee. As the governor has asked me to chair the Complete Count Census Committee here in South Carolina, and the census plays a big part in getting those federal dollars that you're talking about. So I just want to bring it up again while we're all here, and especially because we have local leaders here. We need to make sure that we are getting everybody in South Carolina to be counted. It is so important, especially with going for those federal dollars, and especially in our rural communities that need it the most. They are the lowest counted in our state. So we really need to reach out with our local partners and make sure that they are getting everybody to fill out their census. And that just kind of plays into that. There's a lot of federal money. It's about $3,000 per South Carolinian that is counted. And if you take just 100 people that don't fill out their census over 10 years, it's $3 million in money lost to the state. And we know that there's a lot more, because in 2010, we were upwards of 20% undercounted here in South Carolina. And today, with the current census, the 2020 census going on, the self-reporting, we are sitting at 40th in the nation, which is really unacceptable. Our big cities, our highest, our top 10s are only reporting in number one at 56%. Some of our rural locals are down in the 30% self-reporting. So anything you can do being leaders and reaching out to local NOCs, maybe you can reach out to local mayors. I've been trying to do that through the weeks and asking them to get involved and get their church leaders and teachers involved and getting people to be able to log on. You can do it the first time ever. We can log on to www.2020census.gov and do that, on any mobile device.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, Governor, for putting together our committee, and I think we have we have the brain power in the group to come up with a recommendation to you, and that's the other five, not this individual, but we have the opportunity, and we look forward to working to a good solution.
Thank you, Senator Ryberg. Now,
one last comment, please.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, someone talked about water and sewer. As we all know, that's infrastructure. But broadband is infrastructure of this century. And so I don't think that we could do anything more important than the broadband. But I also wanted to reiterate, we had a lot of discussion under the Protection Task Force where we talked about testing and tracing. The other leg of that stool is isolation. And I think everybody in the room kind of takes for granted if you were tested positive that we could go down the hall in a room and isolate upstairs. But a lot of citizens in the state of South Carolina can't do that because of maybe a one-bedroom apartment or one or two-bedroom trailer with 4 or 5 people, in one household. And so we have to think beyond personal residence to look at shelters or hotel rooms or other means of isolating essential workers once they test positive.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. That's a really good point to make sure that that's part of the decisional calculus as we consider this. To close this out, I'm going to ask Marcia Adams to come up. So we have a fifth component that none of you sit on, but is a vitally important component. It's something that the governor has talked about as long as I've known him about an information portal for our citizens and for people stakeholders to be able to find information. And so I'll turn it over to Marcia Adams, who's the Director of the Department of Administration, to talk about what she's doing and maybe what has been launched.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Governor, Lieutenant Governor James. Today I'm here to talk about a new website, and we're announcing the launch today. This website is AccelerateSC.gov, and it's part of the information component, really the one-stop shop website the Governor has envisioned. This is a website where citizens can learn about COVID-19. They can learn about the revitalization efforts. And I have to stop and say thank you. This has been a truly collaborative effort. The Department of Administration has depended upon many agencies that are today present in this room to help us establish this website and to continue to change this website so that we can keep the most current information up to date. And please remember that today, this is the launch. We're going to continue to add to this website. We're going to continue to improve this website. But this is something that citizens can start to use and be that one place to go as Representative Pope was asking the question, where can I go find this information? You can go to this website. Again, it's accelerate.sc.gov. So if you look at this slide, this is a picture of the website. This is just the top portion of the website. And it highlights, it has pictures that change, and it highlights three things that we want to make sure that we communicate. One is revitalize, what we will accomplish as we accelerate SC, as we revitalize the economy. Evaluate, determining where we are right now and where we want to be through Accelerate SC, and collaborate, coming together to determine how we're going to bring our state back. And beneath those rotating images, and this is just a snapshot, and if you go to the website, you'll see them rotating. Beneath those rotating images is a gray bar that informs everyone that we're still building this site, we're still enhancing this site, and it offers a place to go to learn more about what we're doing here within these committees also. So as I mentioned, this website is designed for our individuals out there, our citizens, to get information about COVID-19 and what we're doing. So the website really, at the very top, features I need to, a citizen focus feature. It's got a drop-down box. It says, I need to learn more about unemployment information. I need to find employment. I need to find a telehealth provider. And these I need to categories will change as we learn what citizens are asking most frequently, as we use the data from this website to determine that. Some of the other things that we're going to have there on that citizen feature at the top is the latest developments, what's going on, what's happened, what's new, video links to conferences, a search feature. We're also going to have a feedback form. We want the citizens to tell us, what do you like about this website? What's easy? What's difficult? What can we add? What can we do to make your experience better in finding this information? And finally, as you look at this website, when you pull it up, when you look at the website, there are going to be information tiles. And what we've done is try to collect some information that's frequently asked, frequently searched for in these tiles so that you can press a tile and you can find the information you want. So to demonstrate that, if you look at citizen information, that part of the website, if you look at these boxes are blue, but when you click on it, it turns white. If you look at the COVID-19 resources for seniors, if you click on that tile, it takes you to Aging's website. And there's more than just what you can see on this page, but it'll give you a listing of the information you may be interested if you are a senior looking for COVID-19 information or assistance. And I want to move on. There's several sections to this website. I want to demonstrate a business inquiry now. And here I want to stop before I demonstrate the restaurant guidelines to Representative Pope. You had a question about the emergency supply collaboration. Where can businesses find access to PPE? They can come here, and if you can see, you probably can't see it, but the top tile on your left, if they click on that tile, it'll take them straight to the website that was being discussed earlier. So this truly is your one-stop shop. If you can't remember any other website, if you remember this, it will get you to the information. So in the example that we have today, the tile that's highlighted is restaurant guidance. And this is an example of what we're doing to build from all of these agency websites and other areas that are helping us, their websites, to bring this information together. So if you click on that tile, you'll see something called restaurant guidance. And there we have guidance from Commerce and the South Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association and DHEC guidance for their reopening toolkit. So if you're a restaurant, you can go to this one tile, and we're going to take you and gather this information from all of these entities, and you have it there, right there at your fingertips, one page. You can click and you can find this information. Now, remember I said we're building this out. It's new. We're going to continue to bring that together. For example, with the testing sites, through this discussion, we already have a tile up for testing sites, and we're going to be reaching out to DHEC and the other providers to list those sites. So this is something that's going to be ever-changing and collaborative. Again, we want to make it their one-stop shop for information. Some other parts of the website highlight businesses, and we're working with Commerce there. We have a manufacturing spotlight today and a recycling spotlight, and these are just looking at some of innovative things that businesses are doing or how they're operating within this environment that may be useful. And finally, I've talked a lot about continuing to develop this website. We want to make it responsive to citizens and businesses. So what we're looking at next and adding and what we're working on are some easy-to-understand graphics and dashboards. Now, this one is not ready yet. We're working on that, but within the next few days, we should roll this out. And what you see there is just a key to reopening. So it's an easy graphical representation of what's open or what's partially open and what they can access. So citizen can understand, is the gym open, is the salon open yet? And we hope to be able to at least forecast as we begin these plans, as we work with these committees and begin these plans, forecast that out into the future. We're also going to have some online inquiry forms where they can email us questions. We're going to develop, and this is all going to be rolled out in the next couple of weeks, a chat bot, some social media engagement, and finally, towards the end of May, a call center. So to view the site, I'm going to say the website address once again is accelerate.sc.gov. I encourage you to go there, check it out. I want to thank the governor for all the support he's given us, and I also want to thank you for the asking the agencies to assist with us. That's been such a great help to us. I want to thank the agencies for so willingly letting us borrow some of your employees to help us develop that and to continue to help develop this. Certainly the usefulness of this website to update this information is going to require efforts from all of us. So I thank you for that support. And also for the AccelerateSC committees, we ask you to work with us on information that you find relative to be posted out there. If you look at that and you think of something that would be useful, please let us know. You can give us feedback. My contact information is in your packet. And I thank you for your time, and we're really excited to roll this website out today. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Marcia. I mean, if you want to see, I mean, folks, like real things happening, that as a result of the work here, I mean, this is something that's beneficial. As far as sharing the website, and I never talk to our friends behind the rope back there, they know how I roll, but make sure you put that website out, all right? So if this is the one time I'll talk to y'all, put that website out for us. That'd be very helpful. Thanks everybody for the great recommendations, and as we close, I'll turn it over to the governor, and I'll let him close us out. Thank you for the hard work y'all are doing. I know some people may have come into this process thinking, well, this is just a group, nothing's going to get done. But that's not how y'all have done this. You've come into this willing to roll your sleeves up, willing to acknowledge that some tough realities exist that we have to deal with. So thank you for your willingness to work and work hard. Obviously, I'll get with our component chairs to figure out what they want to do as far as their next meeting, and I will communicate with you regarding that. So I thank you, Governor. It's your committee. I turn it over to you, sir.
Yes, sir. I'd just like to make an observation. And I think 7 weeks ago, none of us would have realized where we would be today. And I am confident, and I know for a fact, in 7 weeks, we won't know where we'll be then. I think with the state is going to be better. I would love to do a report like we had earlier today on the problems that all the businesses are having, whether it's child care, whether it's meeting payroll, whether it's paying bills, or what you could do in the end of July when the PPP runs out. All that will be at the bottom of the list in 7 weeks. This state is not going to fail. We are spending too much time talking about negative things. They got to be talked about, and there are a lot of negative things out there. But there's way more positive things coming up in the next 7 weeks as it has way more positive things coming up in the next 7 weeks than the negative things that have come up in the last 7 weeks. And I think somehow we have got to start putting a more positive spin on South Carolina and what's going on in South Carolina. We're a great state. We got great leaders. And the beauty of it is the citizens of South Carolina's got the government behind them. They got their back. The governor's got our back. DHEC's got our back. We are in a business-friendly state, and it's more friendly now than it's ever been. And we're going to take advantage of it. We don't have an option. We're not failing. That is not an option. And we need to realize that and somehow spin that, to me, spin that story. Today has been a good day, but to me, I feel negative about it. And we are not going to be negative in the next 7 weeks. And I'd like to see the problems that we've had that we listed today run that same survey in 7 weeks. And I bet you most of them won't even be on the list. If they are, they're going to be at the bottom. And I'm proud. I think we got to start thinking more positive than what we've been doing. And that's all I have to say.
Well, hear, hear. Well, you're exactly right, Henry Swink, from the big city of Effingham. I'm glad you're representing so well. But he's right. South Carolina's the best place in the whole world to live, work, and raise a family, and everybody in here has said that at least 1,000 times. And that's why everybody's coming here and nobody's leaving South Carolina. Nobody's leaving to go back anywhere else. But we do have a great opportunity. And just a couple of points. I want to thank everybody again. I've spoken before to you about the brain power in this room, the experience, the understanding, and it's obvious every time we get together and talk. So we need to do that more. And we'll continue on for some time yet because we're not through. And there are a few things that have popped up that it's clear we need to focus on for a much longer time than this group will be working. And one of them, of course, is broadband. The telecommunication, all of that is so vitally important. And this website with a one-stop, one-entry place is something that is like a dream to probably most everybody in this room, where anybody who's unfamiliar with how to find things and doesn't know where to go, if they can just get on the internet, then they can find it. So that's a great step forward, something that's come out of this. And I guess the best thing that's come out of it is a lot of us in this room know each other a lot better than we did before we started. And we got a little while yet to go together. So Henry, I'm very optimistic, not only about our state and our people, but also our role in this country. I think we have a big role to play, and it's time to play it. So I want to thank all of you again. I know it's taking time out of your schedules, away from your family and everything else, and you're risking walking around. Of course, we using all those social distances things in here. I don't think we've left any of them out. But I want to thank you. Thank you. We got a great state, great people, and this is one more example, and we're making progress. Thank you.